Now let's understand some Six Sigma basics. What is Six Sigma? Many writers and scholars have manifested Six Sigma in multiple ways. Six Sigma could be understood as a measure of quality or a common yardstick of measurement. Six Sigma could be understood as a problem-solving methodology, as a philosophy, and as a management system. Six Sigma as a measure of quality is a mathematical value representing the number of defects per million opportunities. So when a business process is working at 1 sigma, it is creating 6,90,000 defects per 10 lakh opportunities. While a business process at 2 sigma will do 3,08,537 defects, and a process working at 6 sigma is supposed to be doing 3.4 defects in a million opportunity. 3.4 in a million is near perfect. So organizations tend to use Six Sigma as a measure of how their processes are performing. So organizations are using Sigma as a measure of their quality of the processes. If a business process is working at Six Sigma, it means that it is making 3.4 defects in a million opportunities. Farther you go from Six Sigma, wider is the variation in the process. And closer the business process is going towards Six Sigma, the variation in the process is getting reduced. Focus on elimination of variation is the key mantra of Six Sigma. Majorly, all Six Sigma implementation shall attempt at reduction of or elimination of variation in a system. If your business process is working at 1 sigma or it's near about, you are almost incapable of competing in the market, while the industry average would be around 2 to 3 sigma, and world-class organizations and business processes work at 4, 5 and 6 sigma. But you must understand, Sigma is an assessment of processes capability. It ain't about an organization. So an organization cannot be Six Sigma certified, or an organization cannot be working at Six Sigma. One of its processes or many of its processes could be working at Six Sigma. The level of acceptability of Sigma will depend on the cost of that failure. If something is 99.00% right in our daily lives, is it good enough? A mail delivery organization which is operating at 99% correctness or 3.8 sigma may end up with 20,000 lost articles per hour. While if it were to operate at 6 sigma, the loss would reduce to 7 articles per hour. If a business process is working at 99 and the process is about catering drinking water to people, potentially you could have unsafe drinking water for 15 minutes every day. While if it is performing at 6 sigma on 99.9997% correctness, you are looking at unsafe drinking water for 2 minutes per year. A hospital surgery process working at 99% could meaning 5,000 incorrect surgery procedures per week, while at a 6 sigma level it could mean 2 incorrect surgery procedures per week. In an air travel example, a business process working at 99% could mean 2 abnormal landings at most airports each day, while a business process at 6 sigma could mean 1 abnormal landing every 5 years. Now the question is 99% good enough or even 6 sigma good enough? You will have to decide the acceptable level of sigma depending on the outcome, the price that you will end up paying for being incorrect. As an hospital, am I okay with 2 incorrect surgeries per week? Even Six Sigma is not good enough. Maybe we got to improve even further. If you have 1 abnormal landing every 5 years, maybe this is not an acceptable performance. So even if your business process is working at 99.9997%, it may still leave a room to desire for more. 99% is grossly unacceptable in certain business areas. Now let's look at a few key terminologies to understand DPO and DPMO. The first is unit. Unit is an item produced or a service processed as required by the customer. That is, let's say a calculator or a one code created or one account setup. This is a unit. Defect. Defect would mean any non-conformity in a product or service, any product characteristic that does not meet the customer requirement. So if you are doing an account setup and you've made a small typo error, that could mean a defect. If you are selling a calculator and if one of the keys of the calculator is faulty, that's a defect. Opportunity. Opportunity would mean every possibility of making an error or anything that you measure or check for. Any event which provides a chance of not meeting the customer requirement is opportunity. So if I'm selling a calculator, all the elements that can go wrong or the number of keys that can be faulty are my number of opportunities. If I'm taking a call, my QC department has listed for me 20 things that I should do correctly. So all these 20 are my opportunities. Finally, defective. Defective is a unit with one or more defect. That is, if one or more keys is faulty, then the calculator is being referred to as defective calculator. These 4 terms, unit, defect, opportunity and defective, are very important information when you are looking at understanding DPO and DPMO. So defective is always about that unit. The unit may have many opportunities. Any error in one of those opportunities is termed as defect. And our subsequent measurements will depend on these. Let's say a company produces pens. The number for the last 6 months are as below. The number of pens that they have produced is 50,000, which I could call as units. So 50,000 units have been produced. And the number of ways in which each pen can be faulty is 10. So the number of opportunity per pen is 10. While in my QC processes, I found number of faults equals to 10,000, or I found 10,000 defects in 50,000 pens produced. And total number of pens that were declared as faulty is 9,000. So I would say I have 9,000 defective units. Collectively, in 9,000 defective pens, there are 10,000 opportunities, which could mean that there is more than one defect in some of the pens. So number of defects in 1 million opportunities defines sigma, and 6 sigma would mean 3.4 defects in a million opportunities. Next is the term DPO, or defect per opportunity. DPO can be calculated using the formula total count of defects upon total opportunities. The next is DPMO, or defect per million opportunities. DPMO is very simple. It is DPO into 1 million. DPU, or defects per unit. DPU could be defective units upon total units monitored. with defects at 10,000, opportunities per pen at 10, units at 50,000, my total number of opportunities here is 500,000. DPO uses the formula of count of defects upon total opportunities, that is 10,000 by 500,000, which will be equal to 0.02, while my DPMO will use the formula of DPO into a million, which will become 20,000. The next usage of Six Sigma is as a problem-solving methodology. Six Sigma essentially started as a post-mortem approach to problem solving, where you wanted to find out the what, when, why, how of the problem and work at providing resolution. Whatever Six Sigma initiative you pick up, the problem is referred to as problem why. And the approach of the Six Sigma methodology is that instead of superficially attending to the issue, we identify the root causes, commonly referred to as X's, and attend to the root cause such that my problem why is resolved. And while doing Six Sigma project, one must understand that the root cause will come from the caretaker. So you must listen carefully to the process voice. Let's look at a story. Once at an international monument in France, an engineer named Jack was hired to fix the problem of repainting the museum to ensure the monument looked clean and beautiful. Repainting was required every 2 years, whereas similar monuments with similar conditions lasted much longer. Besides the effort of repainting, there were major funds being spent in repainting that frequently. As the first step, Jack spoke to his boss to understand why repainting was required, but he could not get an answer. When he started conversing with many people who had worked in and around the museum for years, and in one of his conversation with the caretaker, he got an answer for his first why. And the answer was that frequent washing of the structure required to clean the pigeon dropping, which was plenty in number. On inquiring about why there were so many pigeons, he was informed that they get easy food as there are many spider webs all over. On further probing, the reason of spider webs were found to be easy food in the form of insects. Understandably, the root cause of the frequent painting were too many pigeon droppings, too many pigeons, easy food for pigeons in form of spiders, too many spiders due to insects. So Jack got the necessary financial approvals for removing the spider webs and killing the spiders, removing the pigeon nests and removing the pigeons. Hence there was a reduction in pigeon droppings. And now that the paint was redone, it lasted there for greater than 3.5 years. So instead of superficially attending to the problem, that is repainting it every time, Jack worked at identifying the root cause of the problem. And fixing the root cause of the problem led to permanent solution to the repainting problem. So while doing Six Sigma or otherwise, one must not challenge the problem superficially. Instead, one should work at identifying the root causes that contribute to the problem, fixing the root causes such that the problem is permanently fixed. The next usage of Six Sigma is as a common yardstick of measurement. Organizations measure business performances in various metrics. For example, the turnaround time of hiring is captured in number of days. Revenue is captured in dollars or pounds. Quality is measured in count. The CSAT measured in percentage. Often, when you want to compare such matrices, it becomes difficult because the unit of measurement is different. Six Sigma started to promulgate usage of methods like Z-score or Sigma scores or DPMO, DPU or PPM, etc., which facilitated creation of a common yardstick of measurement. So now the TAT of my hiring process would be available to me in a DPO or a DPMO score, or a revenue would be available in a DPO or a DPMO score. CSAT, everything, every measurement in the organization is now being converted to Z scores or DPMO scores such that they are now comparable. I can compare the Z score of process number 1 and Z score of process number 2, or a DPMO score of a process number 1 and DPMO score of process number 2. Let's say the TAT of hiring is currently operating at 20,000 defects per million opportunities, while my customer satisfaction is working at 15,000 defects per million opportunities, easily comparable. So Six Sigma, the measures of Six Sigma started to give you certain common yardsticks of measurement of business processes. Six Sigma in its implementation journey had a lot of lessons for leaders, and three key takeaways were distaste to defect and variation, customer focus, and employee engagement. To be able to build the requisite DNA for a good Lean Six Sigma implementation, it was understood that customer focus, employee engagement, and distaste to defect and variation were very important elements to be considered while in the journey of making improvements. The iconic GE chairman, Jack Welch, when asked what is a Six Sigma company, he said, and I quote, "I see a Six Sigma company as a company where its management understands that variation is evil and that you can serve customer with what they want when they want." The very approach of Six Sigma was about changing the definition of defect from a mistake to anything that the customer does not want. Mistakes became unacceptable, but to add to that, anything which was right as per the process specification but was not meeting customer requirement was also considered as a defect. This was a huge shift in which business started to operate. Mistakes were not acceptable anymore, and the acceptance parameters were now to be drawn vis-a-vis what the customer wanted instead of our own capabilities. The second was employee engagement. For an organization to run its improvement journey well, it was important that every element of the organization starts to participate in the improvement journey. In our museum example also, you may have understood that the caretaker of the museum was the one who could help Jack with the root causes of the problem. Unless he had spoken to the caretaker of the museum, the root causes of the problem would not have been known to Jack, and the problem would not have been fixed forever. It is imperative that improvement journey must be built around inclusion of employees. Your mechanism around capturing employee voice, process voice is very important when you are in an improvement journey. The third, that the organization must develop distaste to defect and variation. Quality is everyone's job. Everyone in the system is required to produce their optimum for the organization to do well. If you remember our discussion about process, we were saying that organization is an assimilation of hundreds of processes which are talking to each other. The output from process number 1 forms the input to process number 2. So unless every element in the organization holds itself accountable for not creating defects, not passing on problems, the organization will not be able to deliver flawlessness to its customer. And unless customer is satisfied, businesses will find it difficult to survive. An organization to be able to take up improvement, it is important that every element of the organization must understand that defect and variability is not acceptable. Every element of the organization must be able to contribute to the organization growth. The next, Six Sigma is a management system. For making improvements in an existing business process, Six Sigma has a defined approach referred to as DMAIC, where D is an acronym for define, M for measure, A for analyze, I for improve, and C for control. DMAIC as a methodology is to be used when you have an existing business process where you're looking at making improvements. When a new process needs to be designed, you are looking at another methodology referred to as DMADV, where D is an acronym for define, M for measure, A for analyze, D for develop, V for verify. Let me give you a simpler example to help you understand the DMAIC methodology. To understand the DMAIC methodology, let's use a doctor's analogy. You're not feeling well and you visit a doctor. The measure phase would be that the doctor measures your temperature and takes your blood sample. As part of the analyze phase, post receiving the report and analyzing it, doctor diagnoses an ailment. For the improve phase, to cure the disease, doctor prescribes certain medicines. And once things have improved, to sustain the improvement as a part of the control phase, the doctor prescribes the medicine for 7 days so that the disease does not relapse. Define is about identifying the problem. Measure is about measuring the problem. Analyze is about analyzing the root causes. Improve is about planning for the improvement and implementing the improvement plan, while the control phase is about sustaining the improvements that have been made. This is the DMAIC methodology of Six Sigma, applicable for existing business processes only. Now let's look at the various stages of the DMAIC methodology of Six Sigma. The first stage is define. The project will mandatorily start with you identifying a project need and identifying the people involved in the problem. So you identify the stakeholders. Work with the stakeholders, get their verbatim, and convert that into CTQs or critical to quality elements. Around this CTQ, create the project charter document and get the charter approved. Define phase of Six Sigma is more like a sales pitch that you are creating, trying to get the sponsor's buy-in for the project. You are trying to get the project approved by the sponsor. So you will have to tell him, why is this project important? Why is it a priority? What is the need of doing this project? This is more like a justification of the project need. You submit a plan to the sponsor and the sponsor will approve or disapprove of your charter. The next stage is the measure phase. The measure will start with identification of the CTQ characteristic or the project matrix. Then you set out to create a data collection plan for collection of data around your project why. Then you collect data based on the data collection plan. And you conduct measurement system analysis experiments to validate whether the data that has been collected is correct or not. If the data is okay to move forward, you then assess the as-is process capability. Then you move on to the analyze phase of Six Sigma, which starts with identification of the potential factors or X's and creation of a data collection plan for these X's and the subsequent data collection. Then you conduct some statistical tests referred to as hypotheses to validate which X's actually impact my project Y. Then you identify the critical X's and plan improvements. In the improve phase, you screen the contributing X's, build the action plan, implement the action plan for improvement, and once the improvement has been made, you collect the data for improved Y and validate whether the goal that you set out to achieve has been achieved or not, and that has to be done statistically. You also may want to monitor the before and after of your X and Y. Once the improvement has been made, you move to the control phase of Six Sigma. which is all about sustaining the improvements that you've made. So you set out to develop and implement the process control plan. You set up the SPC study or statistical process control study for your X and Y. You set out to collect data or improved Y. Once you've collected data for the improved Y, keep validating your project Y for goal achievement. And you may further want to redo the MSA study and reassess the process capability. So these are the 5 stages of a Six Sigma project in the DMAIC methodology: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. Define is all about identifying your problem. Measure about measuring your problem. Analyze is about analyzing your problem and the root causes. Improve about building the improvement plan and implementing it. And the control phase is about building a sustenance plan. Once the goal has been achieved, you would want to ensure that the project Y matrix remains in the improved stage forever. Hence, in the control phase, you build a sustenance plan.